The mammoth of content that is Star Wars has been gracing us with video games since the beginning of time. It all started with Star Wars The Empire Strikes Back for the Atari 2600 that came out in 1982. Developed and published by the Parker Brothers, The Empire Strikes Back is a scrolling shoot-'em-up where you play as Luke Skywalker on a snowspeeder during the Battle of Hoth. Your only goal? To defend the Rebel base from the massive AT-ATs coming your way with little to no end. The endless loop of gameplay led this game to receive mixed reviews at the time of its release, inspiring a quite passionate review from critically acclaimed science fiction writer Harlan Ellison. He states that this game is one dreadful life lesson in those of a youthful intelligence who play it. You can only waste your life struggling and struggling. A few years and a number of arcade cabinets later, Namco decided to bring a different kind of Star Wars game to the Famicom with Star Wars 1987. Developed by Bakari Games, this side-scrolling platformer had you squeezing into Luke Skywalker's custom Chanel knee-high boots as you join the rebellion and put an end to the Empire. Although this game has a few issues with its continuity, taking battles from the later two Star Wars films instead of sticking to its namesake, this game would introduce one of the most important genres for the series in its following years. After a number of other side-scrolling Star Wars platformer games throughout the years, Sculpted Software and LucasArts decided they were going to think way outside the box with their Star Wars game and release a side-scrolling platformer. Get it? Cause it's the same game. Anyway, this time they did change it up just slightly by making it a run-and-gun shooter. The developing duo released Super Star Wars for the SNES in 1992, and then the Super sequel games, titled after the sequel movies, in 1993 and 1994. The beauty in these games lies within the SNES's Mode 7, where players could pilot well-known vehicles like an X-Wing and Luke's Landspeeder in the SNES's look-alike 3D scenes. All of this Star Wars video game nerd history is important in understanding how far this Goliath of a series and all its games have come. I didn't even get to talking about the powerhouse that is the 2000 Star Wars games, like Star Wars Battlefront 2, Lego Star Wars the video game, and the god of all Star Wars games, Star Wars Knights of the Old Republic, which is arguably one of the best video games of all time. But we are in a new era of Star Wars games, with games like Fallen Order and Survivor leading the way for what we are here to talk about today. Star Wars Outlaws. Star Wars Outlaws is the franchise's first venture into an open-world action-adventure. Developed by Massive Entertainment and published by Ubisoft, in this thrilling addition to the Star Wars universe, you play as Kay Bess, a scruffy-looking scoundrel in the making.
Who's scruffy-looking?
Kay is desperate for a way off her home planet of Cantonica and gets herself and her Merkle companion Nyx in some deep doo-doo with Zero, leader of the criminal syndicate Zarek Besh. Taking place between The Empire Strikes Back and Return of the Jedi, your goal is to lie, swindle, steal, and become a member of the universe's most wanted, while pulling off one of the galaxy's greatest heists in order to escape the bounty that has been placed on Kay. Now, I'm not gonna lie to you. During the lead up to this game's release, my expectations were pretty low. We all know that Ubisoft and its deep, dark history of underwhelming and underperforming games. However, I held out a little bit of hope, because when it comes to Star Wars and their ever-expanding struggle to make Star Wars more inclusive, I have to have hope, even when it ends in utter disaster. So booting up Outlaws was exciting for me, until it wouldn't load in. Twice. On the second load, there was a message letting me know that since I had installed my game on an external hard drive, that it might have caused some issues. I ignored this message completely and decided to play anyway. This would of course cause me many problems. I was thrown into a game with a plethora of bugs, from long loading screens, buggy doors, a dialogue camera with no dialogue, invisible textures, glitchy music, my blaster disappearing, and more. I was almost at a loss for words over how poorly this game was made. I was devastated. That is until I downloaded the game straight onto my computer. Now, did I cause these problems for myself? Maybe, possibly, who's to say? But I can tell you that no other game has given me issues quite like this one has by installing on an external folder. Now, with all that fixed, I was able to fully dive into the Cantonica system with little issue. Let's begin with what I liked. The base controls for the game on PC are pretty standard. It of course has the basic WASD move controls and the camera controlled by the mouse. The crouch, run, jump, and interact buttons are all very standard but feel very smooth and are easy to understand. The newest controls to get used to involve our lovely and beautiful Nyx. Nyx comes with a few of his own pet commands that take a little bit of getting used to. One of which is the general pet commands. By pressing Q, you can get Nyx to attack enemy NPCs, distract people, and steal. The second one is called a Nyx Pulse. I found this to be a great alternative to the total screen takeover type of NPC visions, like Batman's detective mode in the Arkham games. I feel it takes away from the beautiful atmosphere of the game, and this game has a beautiful atmosphere. With a number of different cities and systems that you can explore, Massive Entertainment has done an amazing job of making these settings absolutely stunning. Whether you're slinking around cities like Canto Bight, zooming through the sandstone mounds of Toshara on a speeder, or trudging through the lush jungle on Akiba, the landscape of Outlaws will have you stopping to look around every once in a while, just to admire its beauty. And the planets aren't the only thing that are an impressive dev team feat. This game manages to do something with a game that I have personally never experienced before ever in my entire life. Good flight control. Now, I might be being a bit dramatic, but there's something about flight in most games that I just can't get behind. Be it confusing barrel rolls, delayed turns, confusing instruction, the list goes on. However, I genuinely had a good time flying the Trailblazer. It was a smooth ride with little to no confusion. The blasters don't take away from the controls of the ship, and the ship goes in the direction you want it to go. The fight sequences with different TIE fighters and other Imperial ships are fun and give you a break from the constant ground shootouts and stealth missions that this game is filled with. Another fun aspect of this game is its implementation of the Syndicate system. Now, a quick, basic spoiler alert for any hints towards the end of the game. If you don't want even the slightest clue of how this game ends, I'd advise dropping out here. Although the Syndicate system doesn't seem to have a large overall impact at the end of the game, it still has plenty to offer. The reputation system impacts a number of different experiences during your playthrough. For example, gaining the trust of one of Syndicates gets you better deals, territory access, and certain jobs, making life a little easier for Kay in some places. In others, however, having the trust of one syndicate usually means you've double-crossed another, leaving a negative reputation in your wake. This can lead to being turned away by people in certain territories, or at its worst, being hunted by syndicate assassins. This system adds an exciting layer to each decision you make in the game while also adding to the world's believability. The system does a good job of immersing you in your gameplay and making things just a bit more challenging. The reputation system also leads way into one of my favorite parts of this game, its sense and creation of adventure. There are so many side quests that come about from different factions at different times, and while some of them can be quite repetitive and ununique, there are quite a few that are a heap and a half of fun. These side quests really make you feel a part of the outlaw life, creating yet another layer of immersion. It's one of my own personal highlights from the entire game and gives it some replayability. And last but not least, another one of my favorite parts of this game is the little guy himself, Nyx. I could talk endlessly about the love I have for Kay's adorable companion, from his incredible useful abilities, to his protectiveness of Kay, all the way to the fact that you can pet him and he can do tricks. This little guy adds so much fun and whimsy to a world that is in desperate emotional need of both fun and whimsy, and I love him so much. With that, I must begrudgingly move us to the next section of this review, my mixed reactions. The first thing I want to get into is the voice acting. Now, I'm not going to sit here and rag on these voice actors from the comfort of the closet floor that I'm recording this in, but when playing the game, there is an unavoidable sense that these voices don't seem to fit all that well in the events of the game. Something pretty serious is going on, and characters are speaking in a bit of a monotone voice. Kay herself doesn't seem to express all that much in many of her lines, and she's in most of the game. This isn't to say that all of her lines are delivered the same, or that all of the voice actors were terrible. It's just that, for the most part, the actors tended to land a little flat, which was a bit disappointing. Speaking of landing flat, there are a few game mechanics that I would like to talk about in this section. The first two are the lockpicking and computer hacking minigames. For both of these, I really liked them at first. I thought the lockpicking was kind of unnecessarily easy, even after changing the difficulty, but I quite like them. However, the longer you play, the more repetitive they become. This isn't a game-destroying experience, but it did take me out of the game at some points. There is also the uncharted wall climbing that every adventure game has to include nowadays to even be considered action-adventure. Again, these weren't horrible issues that I had with the game, just small pet peeves that took me out of the wonderful immersiveness at times. Another annoyance that this game brings about that's a bit more serious to me is the misleading nature of the freedom you have while playing a mission. At the beginning of the game, you are given some small tasks to do that involve little to no direction, leaving you, the player, to figure out how you're going to complete them. One example is when it tells you that you need to find some credits. I chose to go around stealing and finding credits hidden around the city, but while watching a friend play the game, he decided he was going to collect scrap and sell it to vendors for credits. Because of this, I fully believed that when going through missions, we'd be given freedom as players to choose how we were going to complete them. However, the deeper you get into the game, the less control the game gives you over the options. This was incredibly frustrating, as no one wants to be told how to do something in a game marketed as an open world, especially an Outlaw. And now for my last section, my least favorite parts of this game. To start off this sad list, I'm going to talk about the start of the game and its story. It took me a bit too long to catch on to the story of this game, and I'm choosing to believe that this is not just a phenomenon that happened to me. I found that this game did a poor job explaining what was going on and why Kay had any need to get out of Canto Bight. I found this to be incredibly annoying and a bit poorly written. However, I will say that I often ask questions that I am told are unnecessary when telling a story. So this could just be me being a nitpicky critic, but if you're like me, this might bug you all the same. The next on my naughty list is the god-awful weapon dropping that Outlaws has forced upon its players. Although you are able to pick up secondary weapons that people have dropped whenever you're in heavy combat, the game does everything in its power to stop you from ever being able to take them anywhere else. Anytime you do literally anything, the game makes you drop the secondary weapon you picked up, meaning that you can't take it anywhere you might actually need it. This was unbelievably frustrating, and also just plain confusing. I thought my game was bugged for a good couple of minutes before I realized that is just how the game was designed, and not my computer having a stroke. But alas, this is not my biggest qualm with Star Wars Outlaws. That title would be given to the one and only speeder control. I cannot begin to explain how disappointed I am in the way that the speeder is controlled. Not only are the controls ultra sensitive, but the weird camera movement settings also kind of turn the speeder when you're trying to look, so anytime you try to look at anything, it's incredibly annoying. The amount of times you crash into things just by wanting to look at the scenery or at something in the distance, or even enemies coming up from behind you, is painful. And don't even get me started on the combat that is involved being on one of these things. The fighting style was super awkward, difficult to control, and led to more deaths for me than anything else in the game. I cannot emphasize enough how much I don't mess with these bikes. Overall, I really did like Outlaws. Though it had a couple of rough patches with a number of its mechanics, strange voice acting, some other bumps in the road, and that speeder. The good parts of the game far outweigh the bad. The fun and immersiveness of the Outlaw lifestyle was a fun change of pace from other Star Wars titles, and brought about long hours of fun gameplay that I thoroughly enjoyed. Looking back on our Star Wars video game history, it's amazing to see how far we've come, and how this beloved franchise has developed. In the future, I hope to see greater moves towards games like Outlaws, despite the basement-dwelling review bombers that hate it. So to end off this review, I give Star Wars Outlaws 7 angry, misogynistic Star Wars fans out of 10. Thanks for watching!